As the mercury drops in the southern states of Australia, the Subaru National Road Series heads north to the garden city of Toowoomba, the gateway to the Darling Downs. Awaiting the riders over the next 4 days are 5 very tough stages, including a short, but sure to be decisive, individual time trial. In the overall standings, Kiwi Patrick Bevan holds a 3-point lead to Okm Volt Racing's Guy Calmer, and Jack Bobridge from Budget Forklifts is tied for third, with 2 more Avanti strongmen. With the late news of Bevan withdrawing due to illness, can Calmer or Bobridge take advantage of the Kiwis' misfortune, or will Bevan's teammate Joe Cooper assume the leadership role?
Stage 1 of the tour starts in the quaint town of Nobby, where you can step back in time and visit Rudd's Pub, the home of Dad and Dave. Rudd's Pub is situated 35 kilometres from Toowoomba and only 2 hours from Brisbane. Well, as you can see, the weather's starting to close in, and it is predicted to have a lot of rain towards the end of this first stage, which is probably the most difficult first stage they've had at the Tour of Toowoomba. It's 153 kilometres, very lumpy, and there are 167 riders in the field, so it could get quite tricky out on the course and quite slippery as well.
A lot of these tours you do tend to see like an early break just slip away, and people think it's the first day and everyone's fresh, but we never see it again, and that decides the GC.
The big teams rivalry over the last couple of seasons has been between Avanti Racing and Budget Forklifts, and with Avanti's man Patrick Bevan not on the start line due to illness, then it really does open up some opportunities for other riders. But for sure, this will certainly be a battle between those 2 teams.
I think it's 7 rider teams here and we've got 4 guys, so we'll be quite happy to sort of be quite conservative today. You know, it's a long tour and a really hard tour.
Well, as expected, it was a nervous and fast start. Lots of attacks right from the gun, but the pace of the peloton was so high that none of those attacks were able to stick and go away. As they came into the first of the intermediate sprints, at 29 kilometres to go, there was a nasty crash in the main field. Jaden Kopp was first across the line, picking up the 3 points in front of Oliver Martin. There were a lot more smaller attacks that went and came back until the 88 kilometre mark, when Jack Anderson from Budget Forklifts went on the attack. It was quickly covered by Pat Shaw from Avanti Racing, and Charter Mason put their man Dan Fitter out in front as well.
I don't care about KOM.
With the 3 leaders stretching the gap out to 2 minutes, that caused a big reaction back in the main field, and as they came into the feed zone, they had a slender lead that was brought down to 20 seconds to 22 riders that were hot on their heels.
All the teams were very hesitant to do a lot of the work. A lot of the teams were sitting up, small little attacks were going, so Schweitzer then did a big flying attack from 12k to go and got a pretty big gap away, and then I thought, oh, that looks pretty dangerous, I need to be up in there, so I went off.
And then Jack Anderson bridged up to Fitter, and they had a tough chase ahead of them to try and bring back the strong German.
I just kept going, was 15k to go, and I already had 3 second places this year so far. So I'm a bit over the second place, and I thought I could go for the stage one. I saw the other 2 guys coming from behind, closing in.
Yeah, I sort of knew it was going to be a headwind and an uphill drag into the finish, so I thought if we can just keep chipping away, he just will slow.
We just worked as hard as we could from there, caught Schweitzer, and then that was at about 2k to go, and then we just kind of had to cat and mouse to the finish, and I was just too buckled by then at the end.
Sprint is so different after 150k of racing, you know, and hard racing. So, you know, you can be the best sprint in the world, but if you're tired after that amount of time, it's just all about the legs.
And as the sprint started, Jack Anderson had too much strength and came past these 2 breakaway companions to pick up the stage victory.
To do it the way we did it, like riding all day, and I was in the moves all day, and yeah, that's always rewarding for me. That's what sport is about, you know, the guys that ride the hardest, get across the line first.
After a strong performance, it was Jack Anderson taking out the stage ahead of Michael Schweitzer and Daniel Fitter. And the first wearer of the Mavic Sprint competition leader is Oliver Martin. Pulling on the It's Live in Queensland King of the Mountains jersey is Michael Schweitzer. After stage 1, the general classification is led by Jack Anderson ahead of Michael Schweitzer and Daniel Fitter, but they're all on the same time.
I was confident I could beat them and win the stage still, but yeah, didn't work out quite well, and I came second again.
Picnic Point and its adjacent parkland is a reserve of approximately 65 hectares situated on the crest of a prominent bluff along the top of the Great Dividing Range at Toowoomba. And the FKG Tour of Toowoomba heads just down the road from Picnic Point to the town of Helidon for day 2, which has 2 stages, starting with a really nasty short 9-kilometre individual time trial, but the wind is really picking up. Really looks like a shootout between the 2 big time trialers of the National Road Series in Jack Bobridge and Joe Cooper.
Bobridge is obviously quite powerful against the clock, and so I think, if it's all going correct, it'll probably be me and him filling those top 2 places, just depending upon who has most luck out on the course.
Jack Anderson, the overnight leader, is also a pretty good time trialer himself, so he'll be trying to stay in the overall lead by the end of the time trial. With no time bonuses on offer throughout the other stages in this year's tour, it's going to be really important to make sure you get a good result in the individual time trial, because it will be crucial for the final overall standings. Setting out early and looking very strong out on the course was Alex Morgan, the former World Team Pursuit champion riding for the VIS Jayco Apollo team. He posted a new best time of 13 minutes and 16 seconds. Until Sean Lake from African Wildlife Safaris got the better of him by 10 seconds. Joe Cooper, a specialist in this discipline, was motoring around the course.
You got to try and not break the aero positions, so I just tried to stay seated the whole way, and it seemed to work nicely for me.
And by the time he made it back to the finish line, he'd blown the leaderboard apart with a 12:12. Cooper had a short wait until Jack Bobridge came closer to the finish line, and it was apparent he wasn't going to go faster than Cooper. Second across the line for Bobridge, 12:38. And then it was all eyes on the overnight race leader, Jack Anderson from Budget Forklifts. And as he made his way towards the finish line, it was clear Joe Cooper was going to win the stage. Anderson across in 18th with a time of 13:18.
Do a bit of training on the road bike in the TT position, just so you can, it feels natural when you're out there and sort of applying that top end power.
So after a short but difficult time trial, it was Joe Cooper coming out the winner, 26 seconds ahead of Jack Bobridge and 38 seconds ahead of Sean Lake. In the overall standings now, Joe Cooper is out in front, 13 seconds ahead of Dan Fitter, and Bobridge is on 25 seconds. With the wind picking up, the afternoon Stage 3 road race is going to be really tough for the riders. 165 kilometres on a really lumpy course. There are 3 King of the Mountains out around the circuit. One of them's being a Cat 1, so that's going to be quite difficult for the riders, and also 2 intermediate sprints.
I think it's going to be a whole lot of attacking, and narrow roads will play a massive role in the afternoon stage.
With such a tough stage ahead, the riders were very nervous at the start, and that showed with crashes happening in the neutralised section. And the most seriously injured of the fallen was Aidan De Jager, who unfortunately had to abandon the race. And it wasn't long until a breakaway group established a lead over the main field, with Ben Hill, Cyrus Monk and Guy Calmer at the 10-kilometre mark going away.
It was pretty lucky we had 3 guys get out on a break, and made our job a lot easier. Like, the guys just sat Teapo on the front the whole stage.
Even though he's second in the overall series, as they hit the first King of the Mountains climb after 57 kilometres, Guy Calmer couldn't stay with the other 2 riders. And the 2 leaders then went on to the halfway mark, stretching their lead out to 4 minutes. As the race was coming into its closing stages and they hit the 145 kilometre mark, the 2 leaders, Monk and Hill, were absorbed back into the main field after spending 135 kilometres out in front.
Before the break got caught, actually, there was lots of attacks in the sidewind. We had a lot of sidewind action for probably about 30k. Jack Bobridge was trying to put it in the gutter a lot, and so were AWS, and so a lot of aggressive riding before that break was caught.
I tried to get things going in the crosswinds, but wasn't much help there.
As they approached the final King of the Mountains climb, which included 3 very nasty dirt sections, the intensity in the main field skyrocketed.
There was lots of attacks going left, right and centre, and Jack Bobridge had a good wee dig at the end there, and we just caught him just around that last corner.
After 160k in the legs, there's not much actual energy left, and the bunch just shredded to bits, and unfortunately for me, I punched it inside the last 3k and didn't even get to contest the finish. So
In the scramble to the finish line, it was another New Zealander, Brad Evans from Pat's Veg, that came over the top of Michael Schweitzer to pick up the stage victory. Raf Freinstein from Charter Mason, he was third, and then Ryan Thomas came across in fourth.
Oh mate, I'm stoked. Just great to get a win. It's our first NRS win for Pat's Veg, which is our team's just stepped up a level this year, and so I'm wrapped. Very happy.
Coming in behind the main field was the overall race leader, Joe Cooper, but after receiving mechanical assistance within the final 3 kilometres, he did receive bunch time. A fantastic result by Brad Evans, taking out the stage in front of Michael Schweitzer and Raphael Freinstein, making it an all-international podium. To stage 3, the sprint classification sponsored by Mavic is led by Ben Hill. So with 3 stages down after 2 days of racing, Joe Cooper from Avanti Racing leads the way, 13 seconds ahead of Dan Fitter from Charter Mason and 25 seconds ahead of Budget Forklifts' Jack Bobridge. There are many pathways into the Subaru National Road Series, and one of overcoming the odds is the story of Kyle Bridgewood. You're a cyclist now, but you started out in the military. Tell us about your days in the army.
Well, I joined the army in 2007, and I was an ops up, so it's like logistics. In the army, your mates and like the mateship and stuff is really big, and teamwork. It's the same in a cycling team. You're there to support your mates, and you work together with teamwork to win races.
Kyle's an inspirational rider. He's good fun around the team. He never complains. He's someone we can trust. We give him a job to do, and he always does the job.
So in 2011, the year that Cadell won the tour, I got hit by a car early in the morning before work. When the car hit me, it severed my patella tendon. I also hurt my hands and my bowel, collapsed the lung, and I broke my neck and back as well. Still in rehab. I was on the trainers as quick as I could, even though I couldn't do a full pedal stroke, but I could do half, and I was just doing that till I could make it around.
We do catch him at the odd time. At the corner of your eye, you'll catch him struggling with a bit of pain. Walking's very difficult for him. We always try and stay on the ground floor with Kyle.
I think that walking probably just uses the muscles in a different way than riding, and riding's such a repetitive motion, and I've probably adapted to it quite well.
What about the Paralympics then? It's not too far away, Rio.
I'd love to go, but I think it's pretty competitive between me, Alistair and Mickey G. So I think they're a bit ahead of me at the moment.
If he wants to do it, and I'm sure he does, he'll do it. He's done everything else he's wanted to do.
Welcome to Preston Peak Wines, a family-owned boutique wine business based in Toowoomba, southeast Queensland. Established in 1994, the winery has grown in size and reputation, now producing 3,500 cases of wine annually and receiving over 20,000 visitors to the cellar door each year. Just down the road from Preston Peak Wines for the start of Stage 4 here at the Old Queensland Polo Club. It's going to be really tough out there today. It's 6 laps of a 23.5 kilometre circuit. No King of the Mountains out on the road, but really lumpy circuit.
It's going to be a lot harder after a few days of racing already. The lead's going to be tired going into it, so it's going to be a pretty brutal course, I reckon.
Yeah, we're going to try and do a bit of damage early and then save our 2Ps, Jack Anderson and Jack Bobridge, and yeah, try and claw that time back.
In the overall standings, Joe Cooper from Avanti Racing holds a 13-second lead over Dan Fitter from Charter Mason, with Jack Bobridge 25 seconds further back for the Budget Forklifts team. Attacks came thick and fast right from the start of the race, and a group of 10 riders did get away from the main field, but going further from that was Sam Focals, who was really strong all day. He spent so much time off the front. He got caught by another group as well, then went again solo from then. So when the race got to the halfway mark, Focals was still out in front. Race behind was pretty much all together, and then a new group of 7 riders went off the front, including one of the budget riders. There was no one really dangerous on the overall classification until then another group of 5 attacked from the main field, including Jack Anderson. Those two groups then came together. They also picked up Folkers, so it became quite a strong group out in front. Just before that group of 5 caught the 7 leaders out in front, Anderson dropped his chain, had a mechanical mishap. He was very quickly off the bike, putting the chain back on, and then he rejoined those leaders. Well, there's so many steep hills on the course, there was also some very steep descents, and the peloton was flying at certain parts around the circuit. As they were approaching the last lap, it appeared the peloton was going to throw in the towel, and Brad Evans, yesterday's stage winner, decided that would be his moment to attack, and then he did a fantastic job to solo across to the lead group.
And I just thought, why not have a crack? And then I got out there and I got about halfway and I was thinking, what am I doing out here, man? I'm just gonna blow. But I just kept the power on and the legs responded, and I was hurting, but I did well to get there.
When the 6 leaders hit the wall for the final time with 3.5 kilometres to go, all hell broke loose. Girdleston attacked from the bottom, and then Anderson was getting into some difficulty and then had a mechanical mishap and had to change the bike.
Unfortunately dropped my chain for the second time today and couldn't manage to get it back on after much fighting down the descent. Pulled over with the SRAM guys and couldn't get it back on, and basically got the spare bike, got on the spare bike and raced to the finish, and obviously well inside 3k to go.
Coming into the final couple of 100 metres, it was Michael Schweitzer driving it on the front of the lead group, trying to get an advantage over Jack Anderson. Pat Shaw from Avanti Racing was the first to attack to try and go for the stage victory, but yesterday's stage winner Brad Evans from Pat's Veg came over the top of Shaw and was too strong in the closing metres.
If anything, yesterday just gave the team and all our riders more confidence going in today, that we can put it with all the teams here, all the big continental teams, and today just proved it again.
Got to the finish line and was told, no worries, you'll get bunch time, or the time of the guys you were with, and then only to have this decision reversed, a few minutes later, and them saying, no, you won't get the bunch time.
An impressive 3rd place on the stage for teenager Keegan Girdlestone. The experience of Pat Shaw saw him take 2nd, and back-to-back stage victories for Brad Evans. Ben Hill from Charter Mason remains the leader in both the sprint and King of the Mountain competitions. After what was an action-packed day of racing, Michael Schweitzer is the new overall race leader from African Wildlife Safaris, 10 seconds ahead of Keegan Girdlestone from Charter Mason, and 32 seconds back to Pat's Veg's Brad Evans.
Just succeeded in getting the purple jersey. I'm really happy. Big thing for the team and for me.
There was a huge turnout for the Day in the Park festivities for the final stage of the FKG Tour of Toowoomba around Queen's Park. Well, it's going to be a fantastic final stage here around Queen's Park. It's 50 kilometres, 21 laps of a 2.4 kilometre circuit, and it's been a good performance by Michael Schweitzer, the German riding for the AWS team. He's got a 10-second lead over Keegan Girdlestone and 32 seconds back to Brad Evans.
Hope we can defend the leaders' jersey. It's going to be a tough day, but we're really happy that we can accept this challenge today.
Well, we knew there were going to be attacks right from the start. We didn't expect the fastest pursuit rider in history, Jack Bobridge, to attack so early. But when he did, Ben Hill, who was looking after his lead in the sprint competition, he went straight with him. Hill only had a 2-point lead over Folkers in the sprint competition, so he was desperate to pick up the 3 points on offer in the first intermediate sprint, which he did, and then he went on to the second sprint to achieve exactly the same and wrap up the Mavic sprint competition overall. The African Wildlife Safaris team was setting a nice tempo on the front of the peloton, but that enabled a few riders to go off the front, and eventually a 10-man group formed out with Bobridge and Hill. But everything changed when Jack Anderson and Brad Evans, 3rd place overall, attacked off the front of the main field and bridged across to the lead group to make it a group of 12. The hot chase from the peloton reabsorbed the 12-leader group, and as they were approaching 3 laps to go, then the New Zealand time trial champion Joe Cooper launched what was going to be a very dangerous attack.
It was definitely a very gutsy move. He went from probably about 5 or 6 laps out, but knowing Joe, that was definitely achievable by him, so we definitely had to treat that as very dangerous.
And As they came around the final turn to hear the bell for the final lap, Cooper was caught by that chasing group. Two riders from Charter Mason were in the lead group, Raf Feinstein and Dan Fitter. Solid teamwork from Charter Mason set Fitter up for his solo attack, and as he approached the final turn he had a slight gap over the main field and was fighting hard to hold off the rampaging peloton from behind, but the young rider was good enough to claim the stage victory just in front of the overall tour winner, Michael Schweitzer.
This is probably one of my happiest wins so far. This is the first ever time I've gotten up on the top step of an NRS podium, and it's a nice thing to see that my form's progressing and how I'm building up in the rankings of the Australian NRS, and I'm really looking forward to see how this transitions over into some of the international races on the track and on the road later in the year.
Confirmation of a star on the rise as Dan Fitter from Charter Mason takes out the stage victory ahead of Michael Schweitzer from African Wildlife Safaris, and Avanti Racing's Pat Shaw was third.
Got my second place out of 5 stages, so I'm gonna get used to it. So right now.
Doubling up in the Jersey competitions, it was Ben Hill from Charter Mason taking out both the Mavic Sprint competition and also the It's Live in Queensland King of the Mountains comp. The Chronicle Best Young Rider in the Tour was the second place in the overall classification as well. That was Keegan Girdleston from Charter Mason. They came to Toowoomba with only 4 riders, but they were still strong enough to take out the Tinelli winning team competition, and it was budget forklifts. In the overall classification for the FKG Tour of Toowoomba, Brad Evans was third, just behind Keegan Girdleston, and Michael Schweitzer came out the overall race winner.
I was a bit nervous before the start because it was just 10-second time gap and everything could happen, but the longer the race went on, the more confident I get, and so I'm really, really happy to win this tour now.
After 4 rounds of racing, the overall standings in the Subaru National Road Series sees 2 riders out in front tied on 24 points, but on a countback after the Tour of Toowoomba, Michael Schweitzer from African Wildlife Safaris puts on the overall series leader's jersey. The next event coming up for the Subaru National Road Series is the Battle on the Border, and we'll see both the men and women in action.